plenty of evidence that remote work is successful. It helps people be more productive, and it attracts talent from all around the world. A lot of the most talented people are looking for remote work jobs. And if you go online right now looking for a remote work job, they're hard to get because there's very few opportunities.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.
All righty, welcome back to another episode of the Business After Hours podcast. Here with my co-host Jared and our guest Shane. How are you gentlemen doing today?
Doing just fine. Thanks for having me.
Sweet. Yeah, welcome. Glad to have you. So Shane, why don't you give us a little bit of your background and what brings you here today?
Well, I am a business leader, 30 plus years experience. I've run a couple companies as well as own a number of them. I am up in Canada, frigid Canada right now. We're going through a bit of a cold snap, so I'm just hunkered down at home. And so my experience is in remote work and lasted a while. So I wrote a book called The Power of Remote. Well, I co-authored it with Cynthia Watson, and we worked obviously as a passion project during the pandemic. It came out in 2023, so almost, holy crap, it's probably a day off from being 2 years now. It's amazing how fast that's gone. Yes. But and then since then, I've just been really advocating for remote work and trying to help people improve their relationship with their employees, as well as making sure that they have everything they need to be successful and productive.
Yeah. Why do you feel like there's such a push back for remote work?
Well, it's kind of getting the same crosshairs as DEI, I think, in some respects. It's a little bit philosophical than it is logical. There's still a lot of businesses out there that are practicing remote work. Virtually all businesses practice some form of hybrid work, where it's now more appropriate for people to take a sick day but work from home, right? I encounter so many businesses that have 1 to 4 days a week working from home or at the office, and so there's a more straightforward reason why remote work's kind of come back from where we were at the levels of the pandemic. The most obvious one is that in order to do remote work well, you have to have good management, and we didn't have good managers before the pandemic. We had we already knew like this whole take a bad employee and turn him into a good employee and turn him into a bad manager, because businesses just don't do a good enough job training the skill of management, and people just assume you can do it. It's like, oh, hey, it's like public speaking. Oh, you can just go public, just get up there and talk, and for me, there's a combination of elements, but one of the key ones is that if I'm a leader at a large business and I want my team to be successful, I have to either train all my managers to be better at remote work or bring everyone back to the office. And which one's easier for me? Which one's cheaper for me? I might lose a few key employees, but if you're a company like Amazon or Google, people are batting down the doors to get into your company, and there's hundreds of people looking for work, so thousands of people. So it's a pretty straightforward decision, I think, and that's what it really, I think, comes down to, is it's just not feasible for large companies to make that shift.
Is it not feasible, or is it just their own thought that they don't feel like it is?
It's a real culture difference, a shift, right? And we're talking some significant change management, not least being that remote work isn't for everybody, right? Let's say you take 10 people, and the most recent study I saw, this changes depending on the year, but the most recent study I saw, about half of those people want to work from home. Only one person wants to work full time at the office, and the other 4 want some form of hybrid. Yeah. And if you take that, apply that to a large business, let's say you got 1,000 employees, 10,000 employees. Now you got 4,000 employees or 5,000 employees who don't want to work from home full time.
Right.
And so that's a really tough ship to turn.
Yeah, I was really hoping that during COVID that it would have absolutely have made a lot more remote work just because the talent pool now opens up tremendously if they're
Mm.
remote, because you don't have to worry about if you're in the DFW area, that just candidates even for hybrid, but you can go
Yeah.
to Florida, you can go to California, you can go to New York,
Mm.
for
Even different
South
countries.
America.
Yeah,
Huh?
absolutely.
I
Yeah,
said even
and here's
different
the thing,
countries.
Yeah.
is there was a real opportunity for some companies to just to take that as a one-time pain to go into remote work and stay there. And I think there's a large number of them still do. We just don't hear about them, right? We hear about the RTO mandates because they make good news. But looking forward, it makes zero sense to me why a entrepreneur would start a business and in the first few months invest $6,000 to $7,000 a month in an office,
Right.
right?
Mhm.
And then limit their
Yeah.
talent pool to whoever can drive an hour outside of where the office is. It just doesn't make sense. And so, the next Google, the next Amazon is literally being made in someone's basement right now. And we see shifts in companies all the time. Going back 20 years ago, you would never believe that IBM would be where it's at now. You would never believe that Google exists where it is now. And so these large companies, they come and go, despite how rock solid they look. Even 2 years ago, you would have thought Google was going to retain its leadership over the search engines, but now AI is eating its lunch, right? So these technology is going to continue to change these businesses, and there will be another set of large businesses, and those are currently being developed right now from remote work. So
Mm.
and at what point along your path you say, okay, we've got 3,000 people, let's pick an office somewhere, you know
That's
and just to
true.
be add on to that, one of my friends has just started with a large gaming company. They're not super large, but he just told me last night that they're all remote, they all work remotely, and they're taking their entire staff to Portugal for a
Wow.
for a week
That's cool.
as like a team building activity. And that's the type of thing you can do. Imagine the experience, imagine the commitment and buy-in you get from an employee standpoint if you get to go for a 2-3 week trip to Portugal, all expenses paid.
Oh,
I'm not saying that's
absolutely.
the case for everybody, but that's what they've decided to do.
Right.
So yeah.
I think I've always felt like remote really doesn't work for like micromanagers, that just can't sit there and manage them through the computer. I also think like certain positions too would justify working remote versus in person, and vice versa, right?
Yeah.
Retail positions you can't really work from home.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
So
And we have
I think,
some organizations that have a mix of both. Like, so the municipalities, for example, they have people who do things in person. They have people who do things on the computer, and so it's tough for them to make that call that, hey, here's a group of you guys can do this and you guys can't, right? You're
right.
still required to come into the office, and so that makes it tough on them, right? So they come out, and certainly municipalities or other local businesses like that, they need to draw from the local talent pool, so it just doesn't make sense. But for the businesses I'm in, I do business consulting and help. My tagline is I help small businesses who are successful but stuck. I can do that from anywhere.
mhm.
So I know for the most part, at least, we live off of studies, right? Everything has a study anymore these days, and we just kind of go off the findings of the studies. Well, there was a study a while ago that actually said production was higher for remote workers. I don't know what happened since COVID, if something shifted that, but I feel like because you don't have drive time, and we all know how in office works. Those of us that
Yeah,
work that do have to go in office, you drive in, you log into your computer, and then you go to the coffee break room, and then you sit
exactly.
there
Mhm.
for half an hour and
Yeah,
you chat with all your buddies, and then you go to work and you might look on some websites and whatever. And by the time you're an hour in, where when you work from home, you just log in and start working immediately.
yeah.
Mhm.
Are those studies still supporting that, like, production goes up that you know of?
Oh yeah, there are constantly people coming out with evidence that remote work has benefits, and obviously there's some downsides as well. But there's clearly some downsides to working in the office as well. But I always look back to the early 2000s. These larger companies like Amazon and Google were creating these monolithic buildings, these Costco-sized office buildings where people would sit in. And we knew back then that working in those buildings was not productive as well. I mean, the whole concept was, hey, everyone's going to be around to collaborate with each other. And I worked at Disney for a number of years, and they around the time they opened up a large building in Burbank, and you walk in there and it's like it's quiet, it's cold, people are wearing headphones, they're just trying to find some way to get some peace and quiet so they can focus. They had their senior leadership at the same desks as the frontline workers, and no one had offices. And I'm like, I'm sorry, but I want my senior vice president to have an office. I want to go into I want to know that his conversations or her conversations are going to be kept private and not shared with everybody else. And within months of them doing that, certain VPs had taken ownership of some of the boardrooms. Right, this is my room now, and they just worked out of that room. And so we knew that style of working was wrong. And lots of companies ignored that evidence. And so companies tend to, I don't know, tend to follow a different playbook when it comes to say, okay, let's build an office. What's cheapest for us? What makes it easier for us to keep an eye on people? And that doesn't necessarily always equate with the bottom line at the end of the day.
I feel like there's a lot of technology out there now that can micromanage for you, essentially, because there's computer monitoring things you got to log into, or if you're not clicking enough, they can see. But then also productivity. So I feel like a lot of this can be just solved with a lot of the different technologies, but you save in building cost and electricity cost and plumbing cost.
Yeah. I do want to caution about using anything that tracks people's performance on a computer. I've heard of everything from the camera is on all time and it keeps track of whether you're in your chair, to keeping track of keyboards or mouses, mouse wiggles. A lot of people find ways around that, for starters, and it comes back to the old saying, what gets measured gets done, right? So your productivity isn't really necessarily measured in keystrokes. In fact, a really good productive employee might use fewer keystrokes for what they're doing and take less time. And so a good company, and this is irregardless of whether you're a remote work or not, measures things in what gets done. So, right. Did you commit to this and did you get it done? That's as simple as that. And if it's done well, all the tasks that people say they would do roll up into the projects that people said they would get done, and those projects roll up into objectives or OKRs, which roll up into long-term goals. And so there's a methodology for keeping track of everything, but it's a little bit less structured. There's a little bit of trust in there, and that can be tough for some people.
So is there consult companies that do you consult companies that are looking to go remote? Is that kind of what you do?
For the most part, most companies these days have they've made their decision by the time I get involved and I help them with it. So they may have if they've started remotely and they're just not good at it, I help them provide some direction on how to improve their. Like I said, it usually comes down to management, or they are still holding on. I find that there's very few companies that are currently in the office who are making the leap. Most will dabble with hybrid first, and because it's like I said, it's a real culture change, and what tends to happen is that because they still have people who live nearby. And because they still have a large percentage of them, like 40, 50% of them, who do want that social fix of the office, that prevents them from making the push completely. But they will still start to hire people from other cities, other states, and maybe even other countries that will work full-time remotely with the people who are working hybrid. And so it's a bit of a mix. And so I generally help companies work with distributed work, right? So as in any situation, even with companies that are full-time in the office, you're likely still working remotely with people in your own office, unless it's a small office, right?
So is there a reason why you would not recommend going to an office or getting an office, especially for I know when you're starting out, obviously, for some businesses you can do it remotely, but is there a point when you're like, okay, now we need an office?
honestly don't think there is. I think that there's been plenty of evidence that remote work is successful. It helps people be more productive, and it attracts talent from all around the world. A lot of the most talented people are looking for remote work jobs. And if you go online right now looking for a remote work job, they're hard to get because there's very few opportunities. So as a sort of a power up that a company could do is to say, okay, we're going to hire remote workers, and they will get access to the best talent pool in the country.
Now, obviously, there's a lot of trust that goes into hiring somebody across the country for remote only, because you may never, like, I've worked for several companies that I've never met my boss, never met their boss, never met any of my coworkers, right?
Yeah.
How do you go about identifying that talent to make sure that it's a gold mine strike for that talent?
Yeah. And I would start with saying that I think that the hiring process is somewhat challenged anyways. I mean, people get, just to make sure we're talking apples to apples,
Right.
companies in office businesses hire bad people too.
Sure.
So when you do it remotely, I think that I'm also a firm believer that talking to you guys for the video isn't necessarily preventing me from building a relationship with you, right? In fact, there was one study from the Wharton's Neuroscience School of Knowledge that said that what they came up with a tagline that brains that fire together wire together. And what I fall back on is there are tons of people playing Call of Duty online right now who have teams from all across the world, and they are the closest people. And you always see these stories of hey, his team members get together after 13 years of playing online. They've never met, and they're just best buds, right? And so and I've experienced this myself with running remote businesses and working with people I've never met before and having strong relationships with them. So getting back to your hiring thing, I think it's just important you do some you due diligence. You follow up on the references. You give them the 3-month time to make sure that they're working and settled in, and then remotely you just need to do a bit better job of managing them, right? So give them a really good onboarding program so that when they come to the office, their whole first week is scheduled for them, and then they know who they're going to be meeting. They get introduced, and so there's a lot of responsibility falls back on the employer to make sure that relationship isn't squandered, by mismanaging how they're introduced to the business.
How do we change the mindset of these managers and leaders that feel like everybody needs to be in the office?
That's a good question. I don't know. There's some we will change. Again, I think that at certain levels, the RTO mandates are a little bit philosophical. There's the sense that if I can't see you, I can't trust that you're getting your work done. And I'll be the first to say there's benefits of getting together in person sometimes. So in an ideal world, a company would save money on their office and put that money away to get people together in person occasionally, like in Portugal for a week, and
right.
And then they would have that opportunity to do build social connections and perhaps do some brainstorming and those parts of the activities which are better in person. But a lot of people who, it starts at the bottom, right? If we can teach managers to be good managers from the start and recognize what their role is, rather than being a micromanager or being the one who has to go and look to see someone's there, then they don't turn into senior executives with the same mindset.
Yeah. How has that been a shift in management for managing?
Well, ironically, the skill set you need to be a good remote manager is also the same skill set you need to be a good manager in person. And I'm sure you've had those great managers in the past, and you think about what made them a good manager. That's the same skills they need to be a good manager in remote work, and it comes down to understanding how to delegate work. So if I got a task for you to do, I'm not just going to say, "Hey, Jared, you got to just do this by Tuesday." Jared doesn't get a chance to say, "But I've got other things to do." I've had so and so told me to do this, and so and so. So there's a aspect of sitting down with you and saying, hey, here's point A, here's where we're going, here's point B, here's where we're coming from. How long do you think it's going to take you to get there? And then, get their steps along the way, but then help them understand or help them see how they can do it faster, or give them some coaching on it. Then figure out how it fits with their priorities. And this is all stuff that most managers just don't have time for.
Right.
But they don't realize that it saves them time in the long run, because they get, someone like me is sitting down with a good manager, and they work through a task that I would ordinarily would say it would take 3 weeks. They give me some coaching and get it down to 2 weeks. They follow up with me throughout the whole time, and help me finish it on time, with good quality. It doesn't create more rework. I don't miss my deadline. That missed deadline doesn't create other problems, and it's all connected in a way. And so it's important that everyone understands the how everything works together. And certainly, delegation is important. Being able to handle a lot of the conflict. Oh, you got some pets at home.
Outside dogs. Getting the inside dogs going.
Yeah. And yeah, so it's all so good delegation skills, good people skills in terms of understanding their role, their coaching, and rather than telling, and being able to do good active listening, being able to understand how to create psychological safety within their team, so people feel comfortable speaking up, and bringing innovative ideas to the project, to the group. And it goes on and on and on, though. These are all important skills that managers need.
So when is a good time for a company to reach out to you for your services?
Oh, great question. Thanks. Yeah, the client we're looking at is, we're going after, or I shouldn't go after, probably not the right way to put it. We work with those solopreneurs who've started a business and they've done very well, and they've got a product or service that works. They've grown to about 30 or 40 people, and now they're busy doing non-important stuff. They're no longer working on the business; they're working in the business, and they find themselves doing nothing but administration, or they're being stretched too thin. And it really comes down to, they know they need to hire somebody, but they don't have the money to hire a full-time person. They don't have they don't have the experience to hire someone who can help them. And we come in and help them with what we call the plateau. They hit the plateau. They could possibly grow larger, but they're stuck. And so those are the businesses we work with. And it's not necessarily a technology or any. We're working with a large number of companies from diverse industries, and we help them understand where they can make important changes to the way they work to improve their business.
Awesome. So, how do you guide? Because I guess, I feel like, if any of this is to be successful, it does start and end with the management.
Yeah.
And like, one of my best managers that I had was a remote manager, and she would always put on Zoom events. And so after work, we'd do like a Zoom event where you bring an alcoholic beverage if you want to the table and eat dinner, and we'd all order, something from DoorDash or something, and have it all come in, and then we'd all open up and just have casual conversation as if we all went to the bar together. And I feel like we kind of miss the mark on a lot of that in times that I don't know if it's getting caught up in the business, but realizing that we can still utilize this technology that we have and still connect like we would even outside work.
Yeah. And so there's a couple of things there. First of all, I think for the remote workers, they don't necessarily have to go to work to be social, right? They can get their social fix outside the office. And I think that's one of the other benefits remote work has, is that you typically can't choose who you hang out with at the office, because they've been hired and you have to deal with them. And one of the other benefits of remote work is that remote companies have far less drama. There's no personal friction. People are just there to get their work done. And so that solves a lot of problems. But what you said was very accurate. There has to be some leadership who are going to bring in some element of development of the relationships. And the key word for me is relatedness. So relatedness comes from group called two guys, Edward Deci and Richard Ryan. They came up with the self-determination theory back in the 80s, and they were looking into what motivates people. And up until that point, people largely thought that motivation was extrinsic. In other words, it was applied to, there's a carrot and a stick. There's a punishment if you don't do your work, or you were motivated to do it by some external factor. And they flipped it around, so they think that motivation is mostly intrinsic, and it's guided by three principles: autonomy, how much control do you have over the work; competency, how skilled are you at the work; and then relatedness, how connected are you with the people you're working with. And that relatedness isn't quite friendship, but it's a little bit above small talk.
Sure.
So we're getting a small amount of relatedness here because we're learning a bit about each other, and it's if we were to jump on a call again, we'd say, "Hey, Jeff, how's it going?" We'd probably talk about something. So there's a few things you could do to build it, and one of the easy ones is icebreakers. And then the icebreakers are usually the domain of consultants, and they're usually the first hour of a consultant comes in and lines people up and say, "Okay, line up according to your birthday or your height," and it's an activity to get people thinking. But remotely, you can spend the first 5-10 minutes of a meeting asking like a thought-provoking question, such as what's a smell that reminds you of your childhood, right? And so it takes people out of the day-to-day work, and it gives them a little bit something to talk to. And Jared says, "I like bread," and Jeff says, "I like bread as well," and it reminds me of my childhood. Now you got something that connects the two of you, right?
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be too heavy, but you can also do little activities like I played rock paper scissors with a contest with a group of people, and just do this, and it works, and it's fun, right? Gives a bit of levity during the day. And there's also lots of activities that people can do that are a little bit longer, like what you're talking about. The key to it is to make sure that they're facilitated, because if you just get a bunch of people on a call, you're going to end up with the extroverts talking about the big game last week, and the introverts sitting back and probably scrolling on TikTok or watching YouTube videos or something like that, right? So if you have someone, and it sounds like your manager is this kind of person, if she's there to get people to talk to each other, she'll facilitate the conversation. She might ask people about what's going on and have some bring people in who aren't talking and that sort of thing.
She definitely made it engaging. I can tell you that. Yeah. It was great. Well, as we wrap up here, why don't you go ahead and give a little input for the company here and what you guys do and who should contact you? Yeah.
So I happen to be fortunate enough to be one of those people who have a unique name on LinkedIn. So by all means, reach out to me if there's anything you'd like to connect. I'd love to talk to people. Buy the book if you throw the up again. There it is.
There you go.
There's the plug. It was published through Forbes. It got pretty well received. Was bestseller for a period of time, and it's been very well received in terms of the advice it provides. I think it's still very very topical. So it's
awesome. Jared, you got anything you want to add?
Thanks for coming on, Shane. I'm a advocate for remote work, so definitely love being on this conversation of remote work and just trying to break through that culture. So thanks for coming on. Thanks for sharing. And hopefully, some companies reach out to you and really utilize your skills.
I appreciate it. Thanks, guys. It was fun to be here. Yeah.
Yep. It was a pleasure. All right.
Welcome to the Business After Hours, where the ties loosen, the suit relax, and we talk business without the boardroom. Grab your favorite drink, kick back, and let's dive into the world of business after hours.